You are listening to Digging In Podcast, presented by Rooted Wealth Advisors.
Welcome back, everybody, to another new episode on the Digging In Podcast, brought to you by Rooted Wealth Advisors. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is John Savarino, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Connor Zimmer, out of Denver, Colorado. Connor, how are we doing here this morning?
Doing incredible. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing wonderful. I'm jacked up on coffee, ready to rock and roll. So we're gonna be running fast, and we're gonna bring just a lot of good content to our viewers. But yeah, man, we're both here in Bourbonnais, Illinois. I had someone tell me, she was like, "Man, that sounds so French," and honestly, I didn't even realize it.
I hadn't thought about that either.
I really didn't either. She's like, I've heard you say, Bourbonnais so many times. I have no idea where that's even at. But here we are in our home office, beautiful new podcast studio. And Connor, you're going back to Denver this afternoon. Is that correct?
I am. Cool. Just a few hours here, but I figure we get a couple podcasts in.
It's our first time together, so I'm pretty pumped. But what I want to talk about today is really just kind of encompassing the CFP designation that you have. I think that means you're kind of a smart guy, and you know what you're talking about. But explain it to me, explain it to our viewers. What does CFP mean?
Great question. So CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner.
Ooh.
And it's really just taking things above and beyond just, like an investment advisor or a representative or something like that, right?
Kick me in the dirt.
No, not in that way, because I know how you plan, and you plan, pretty much with exactly the same tenets that we all do here at Rooted, right, as a fiduciary. But, CFP was originally just something that I thought, well, I always want to be held to that higher standard, and there's certain, ethics standards and planning standards, and just, hey, making sure that we're not just looking at the investment piece of the puzzle and looking at everything. And that's really what drove home why I wanted to become a CFP.
Okay, so Certified Financial Planner is ultimately what that stands for. So take me back, whether it was, I don't know when did you wake up and say, I want to be a CFP? Because it's a very rigorous exam, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, yeah. Give you a little bit of backstory.
Please.
Let's reverse, 15, 20 years or so. back to my first job.
Cool.
All right.
Okay.
I worked, if you know anything about Denver, Longmont, just north of their suburb, is where I grew up.
Okay.
And I got my first summer job. I was 14. And, I forget what I made for the summer, but it was probably barely like $1,000 or something like that, right?
Okay.
Because, you can only work 30 hours a week because you're under 18, all this stuff. But I was like, I'm going, man, I'm making minimum wage. Life is good, right? And, it was drilled into me, and I'll give this credit to my folks, but especially my mother. And, if you're watching this, Mom, I probably haven't come out and said that, but now you get the credit, is that really drove home like, hey, you need to be saving some money. And she said, hey, you need to open like a Roth IRA. I'm like, I just made this money for the summer. I want to go to the movies. I want to go buy candy, I want to buy a car in a couple of years. But she's like, no, let's put some money in the Roth. And I was like, man, all right, I guess so. And it's just, you just watch that money disappear because you're 14 and you're like, well, there goes half my summer. There's half my year of money. But I think that really drove home the power of investing, and really just over those years, even before college, but going into high school and all that, it's like, wow, so my money, I can't spend it, but it's making more money. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's actually really cool. I like that. Maybe I should do more of that. And then I started, playing with all the calculations of, well, what if I did this for 20 years or 30 years, right? I'm still 15 at this point. I got maybe 50 years until retirement.
Right.
And I'm looking at a big number. I'm like, oh, that sounds awesome. So that's kind of what drove me down that path.
Okay. Wow.
But you asked, what made you want to be a CFP? And that was more once I knew I wanted to be in finance, just because it interested me because of my upbringing and because, that was stressed by my folks, I was just like, well, what's kind of the biggest, baddest, certification I can get? You might as well start at the top, right?
Yeah,
Might as
I
well
like
start
that.
with the biggest one.
I like that.
And I went through a program for that, right? There's extra schooling and things of that nature. I had some great professors, and eventually just, studied. And I remember I would wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning because I'd go to work, and then I'd go to school, and then I'd take my CFP exam course and all that. So, I mean, it's funny, waking up at 4 o'clock doesn't sound fun, but like I look back at that time and I'm just like, that was really cool.
Wow.
Like, just something to achieve. So,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the long-winded story of what got me there.
Interesting. I mean, it's definitely something to be proud of. And I think what's neat is what you always hear is like, make your money work for you. And a lot of folks don't really find that out until later in life. And it sounds like you learned that lesson super early, because of your mom, and you got to see your money working for you, and it really interested you. So that's pretty cool. So, you're this big bad CFP now. So I thought I heard you earlier. There's like pillars that go with the CFP. I mean, like I think we all understand, like it's like you are the biggest and the baddest. I'm just kidding. But you're obviously held to a much higher standard than, other advisors, that are probably in the industry. It probably brings you a wealth of knowledge, that helps, maybe put a few more arrows in your quiver, more tools in the tool belt. Anyway, what are these pillars? Like, I tell me more about this, or maybe I'm not understanding it correctly.
No, you're really spot on it. And really what CFP, Certified Financial Planning, is all about is, it's in the name, financial planning. It's not just investment planning, it's financial planning. So there's so many more aspects when it comes to your financial picture than just investments.
Okay.
Right? As a 14-year-old, yeah, probably investments is really the only thing I'm looking at. But now, and especially for our folks and our clients, our prospective clients, right? There's so much more going on in their lives than a 14-year-old with, $500 in a Roth IRA, right? They have different types of accounts. So we need to start thinking about, hey, what are the tax implications? We need to think about Social Security, pensions, income. Like, what is that going to look like when we no longer work? And I think that's the biggest thing for us. And, how Rooted plans and how that CFP standard is saying, hey, we need to look at all of these aspects. Investments are important, but it's not just, how big of a return I can get. There's so much more value that can be brought to you by a true holistic planner than just return.
Interesting. So is there any, like, not to put you on the spot here, but like anything specific, maybe it's 1, 2, or 3 things that like you learned, during your studies of, for the CFP designation, like anything specific that was like an aha moment as you were going through the studies or the training, for the CFP?
I think, I hate to keep going back to it, but it's really just that holistic thing, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, hey, I have, $500 grand or $1 million in an IRA.
Yeah.
It's a whole different question, and frankly, a decades-long problem of, well, how do I get the most dollars out of there?
Okay, I'm following now.
Right. So that's really the power of it, is I would say. And of course, there's different aspects to it as well, of being a fiduciary, being held to a different ethics standard. And again, being a CFP, there's certain continuing education requirements we do each and every year to keep up with that.
Gotcha. So what it sounds like to me, it's not necessarily, having a CFP isn't giving, it's not this magic bullet is what I'm gathering. It's not that you have these magical answers, but it does sound like you are much better equipped to help folks plan, whether it's, their finances or their retirement. You're just much better, equipped and held to a much higher standard. Like, is that kind of what I'm gathering?
Yeah, I'd say there's a bit of a higher standard.
Okay.
Not to say that somebody that doesn't have those letters after their name can't be that, right? Again, just being but again, just what I always say, I mean, whether you work with us or whether you work with somebody else, I'd say, hey, make sure they're fiduciary.
Right, fiduciary.
Because a lot of times people come in and I'll look at this, I'm like, well, they're taking commission and they're taking management and they are buying into their own funds and they're like triple dipping here. I'm like, that is not a fiduciary, right? So just making sure, one, fiduciary, and then, let's be honest, like some letters at the end of your name don't necessarily mean the world. It means that hopefully they've gone through that education and passed that test. but there's lots of smart advisors out there without that. I don't want to be the advisor that has, 7 different designations after his name. That's not a smart time investment for me. I'd rather pour that into our clients, into my own knowledge. You can be a great advisor either way.
Wow. No, I think that's that's powerful. So one thing would be, if you're, if someone young or whatever path they're in their life, if they're studying for their CFP, any tips or tricks that you want to give them, or maybe just a little bit of words of encouragement?
I remember taking the test that day though, and I was like, man, I don't know if I passed this, right? You get like a little lunch break, and I'm eating lunch in my car or whatever at the testing center. I'm like, man, just gotta rally for the second half of this. But I mean, I would really say you're not studying for a test. You're understanding how to be a holistic planner, right? So if you just come at it from that angle of, hey, this is knowledge that's going to help me for the rest of my life. Hopefully you're not coming at it from the perspective of, hey, I'm just going to learn this and then I'm going to forget it once I see that green pass. Then it's much easier to do. And what you're always looking for, and again, with the CFP having the different ethics standards and things like that, it's like, well, what's best for the client? It's, again, same thing as a fiduciary. What's best for the client? If it's best for you but not for the client, hey, not the right answer.
Right. Interesting. No, I think that's good advice. It's good advice. I mean, don't look at it as if, all right, I got to answer this A, B, C, or D. It's just having a good foundation of what you're learning and how you're going to be able to apply that and help, serve families in your career path. So, no, that's cool, man. I think, if you're, interested in maybe getting an evaluation from a certified financial planner like Connor Zimmer out in the Denver, Colorado metro area, then would love, give our office a call, 866-766-8332. Maybe you are in Central Illinois and want to give, or want to have your portfolio evaluated by our team of fiduciary advisors. Then once again, give our office a call, 866-766-8332. Connor, just love having you on the Digging In podcast, and can't wait to do it again, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This was Digging In Podcast, presented by Rooted Wealth Advisors.